Hey y'all, Zelda here. I am here to talk about why you might want to get a reading, or what's the point of getting a reading or a name for a skull that you have or a carving that you have. The reason I'm answering this is because I have had some curiosity and questions about it that finally it felt like my guides shared a little bit with me. And I wanted to pass that on and see what your experience was, whether that was the same for you, and also just like share um, my own evolution around it, which I think can be kind of helpful. Um, so, first of all, this isn't a video that is designed to like tell you about the history of crystal skulls. That is far too extensive and in depth for this type of video. This is really about a reading, which is it could be a tarot reading for a skull, but oftentimes when people say a reading, what they really mean is like a mediumship reading, where they are channeling the being in your skull and giving you information about it. So, first of all, what is a medium? A medium is someone who is intimately connected to other dimensions or other times that is not just this one in the here and now. Um, this can sometimes look like mediums being people who can speak to dead folks who have died, right? Beloved dead, ancestors, lineage, that type of thing. It can be having a really strong connection to your ancestors. It can also be people who work with interdimensional beings, such as star beings or like beings from different planetary systems, different times, or it can be other interdimensionals like dragons, unicorns, fae, that type of thing. Um, so all of those can be mediums. And the teacher that I have worked with the most for mediumship talks about mediums needing to be recognized and that not everyone actually has mediumship abilities. I still don't know if that's something that I believe or not, but I just wanted to share that. However, lots of people have abilities still to work with the other dimensions, other beings, and value, and like have value that they gain from inviting that into their life. And lots of people have psychic or clear gifts like clairaudience, clairvoyance, which is like clairaudience is like receiving messages through sound that you hear, like maybe this could be like a clip of a song that means something, of course, to you, or that you hear some words that almost sound like they're coming from inside your head, or some people hear them outside, right? Um, Clairvoyance meaning like inner sight or clear sight. Clairsentience being like getting feelings or sensations in your body, that kind of thing. So that is oftentimes what is meant when someone says a skull reading. And that is no different if you book a reading through me for a skull. That's what I'm talking about, is connecting with the being working inside of your skull. Um, However, when someone like me, for instance, sells a skull or rehomes a skull that has a name and a being inside of it, I think it's also very interesting that you don't actually, it's like there's a bid for connection from a guide, and you don't have to accept that bid for connection. So, like, if you get a skull and someone says, this skull's name is something, I have one here. This skull's name is Elric. They've been in the Week Ahead Tarot videos before. For me, this is Elric, and this is Elric's skull, and I would have a hard time having Elric not be in this skull, because this has become the place where I connect. It's almost like an altar of sorts for that guide to me. And that doesn't feel right to me. However, there was a point where this skull was just a skull I had received and that it didn't have a being in it yet. And that doesn't mean that Elric, the guide, didn't exist yet. Doesn't mean that that guide wasn't trying to communicate with me in any way. It's just that it anchored in to this as a home and now can more easily and easily transmit and communicate with me. And so, oftentimes a reading is like a bid for connection from your guide. So if you feel resonant with a skull that you see a reading from, it's kind of like a medium is a like screening calls or something and saying like, hey, this person wants to call you, can they do that, right? And you get to then say, yes, I've been wanting to talk to that person, or no, I don't know that person and I don't want to, right? You get to actually have that agency. And if it is a guide of yours, they're going to keep showing up. So really, in theory, if you wanted to go to my website and you wanted to look at the readings of one of those guides and they really spoke to you, I believe that you could go and you could sit in meditation and you could call to that guide. And if they were meant to work with you, they would be able to come work with you and you wouldn't need any object whatsoever to do that. However, um, there are benefits to being able to use an anchor of some kind to be able to connect with that. And so some of that is like the function of a crystal skull is that like we actually use quartz and we use things like that as like memory storage or as like in computers, right? That it like quartz can store information and energy, and other minerals can too. And so this feels like part of the value, right, of building a connection. It's kind of like instead of always having to be connected or always having to kind of like fumble around and hope you arrive somewhere at the same time, you like both have a cell phone that you can use to get in touch with each other and say like, hey, I'm here at the place, right? I'm waiting for you. And so this is one way that I think working with like a skull and getting a skull reading can be really helpful is like if you don't identify as a medium or haven't worked with those abilities at all, then it can be very difficult to kind of decipher. It's kind of like having someone there who's a little bit of like a spiritual mentor or like a guide in some way, right? Guides can be both human and otherwise, right? We can have guides that are almost like tour guides in this life where they help show us the ropes somewhere and then they leave our life, right? And so getting a reading done can be like a guide or a support for a being that wants to work with you. Um, but I always really discourage the idea of like operating from an idea of like not enoughness that like you have to get this or you can't work with the guy. Like you have to say yes. I don't actually believe that that's true. I think that my relationship with guides are interdimensional and beyond time in a lot of ways, and that whether or not I connected to like an anchor or an object, I could use like another object just the same, but it's a little harder, I think, for them to communicate through sometimes. But I do have the experience of, a guide who lived in a certain skull. That skull broke and the guide chose another skull and now uses that skull, right? And so there is this aspect of like the guides are not tethered. Um, a dragon is not this. This is a representation. This is an access point. This is a portal. This is a doorway. This is a telephone, right? This is a way to communicate and receive information. This is a way of making something bioavailable, right? Like it is the key that unlocks the door, maybe. And this also, I think, explains, because this is something that my guides were telling me, is like this also explains a little bit of why could a skull come and then their name kind of changes, or like it feels like the guy that came with the skull actually isn't the guy that you're working with. That could totally be true. What happens then is that either one, you did not accept the bid of connection from that other guide, or that guide was not meant to work with you and a different guide said, hey, that's okay, I'm glad I got you on the phone while you were here, right? And jumps in to kind of connect with you, and that connection happens through that skull. That's totally fine and appropriate. And sometimes names are just reference points, right? A big thing that I always get asked is like, can you tell me my skull's name? And like, while the answer to that is often yes, I do hear names of skulls quite clearly. That is one of the things that seems to come up a lot in my readings, if people don't already have them. But also a name is just a reference point, just like this is just an anchor, right? That while useful and valuable and can be even magically relevant to know this kind of like true name of something, we also we have names and they change. I'm someone who changed my name. Lots of people change their names. This is an identifier. And so it's okay for a name to evolve and shift. That doesn't mean anything is wrong inherently. It kind of means that your relationship is still fresh with a guy, that they're like still informing you of the way that they are wanting to be perceived and connected to, or maybe they're updating you a little bit as you attune your ear a little more clearly to what they're saying. So I hope that that explained a little bit about like, what's a skull reading? Do you need one? I hope that maybe you feel a little more informed to make a decision about whether that's something that's interesting or exciting for you or not. And if you feel differently, I would love to know what your opinions are. Do you think that that's what a skull reading is? What do you think? Also, let me know any other questions you have in the comments. Bye.